Hey guys, Andre from High Performance Academy. Welcome along to another one of our webinars. This week we're going to be talking about engine blueprinting. In my opinion, probably one of the most misused and misunderstood terms in the world of performance engine building. So we're going to dive into what that term actually means and what it really means when we are building an engine, whether we are going to be going to the true extent of blueprinting. As you'll find out, probably not what we're going to be doing for a street car build anyway. Before we get into that though, I'll just cover off what's been going on over the last week or so. And I just wanted to actually start with a little, I guess it's a bit of a trick. It's definitely nothing new, it's not pioneering, but for those who aren't aware of how powerful using a logging program can be when we're out road tuning, if we don't have the benefit of the dyno, then it really can be a game changer for helping us dial in the accuracy of our fuel delivery in particular. And this sort of came to light as part of the road tuning module of the Ecumaster worked example that we've just added into our practical standalone tuning course. So that's a full rundown on the HPA 10-step process being applied on our version 11 Subaru STI using the Ecumaster EMU Black. If you are interested in learning more about that, you can check that out on the courses page of our website, hpacademy.com/courses practical standalone tuning. However, what I just wanted to address was some of the intricacies and problems when it comes to road tuning. Now here at HPA, we are lucky enough that we've got a really high quality Mainline Pro Hub dyno. Regardless of how good the dyno is and regardless of how well developed the dyno room is, you're still likely to find that there are small differences between the fueling, for example, you see on the dyno and what you see out under real world conditions. And there's a variety of reasons for this. It comes down to how we load the vehicle, particularly for wide open throttle ramp runs. Are our ramp run speeds realistic? Are we ramping the car too slowly or too fast? The other aspect though that's really hard to replicate on the dyno is the airflow that we see at road speeds out on the open road or the racetrack. And even with a really good fan, it's hard to get that airflow. And this also obviously affects the sort of temperatures we're seeing in the engine bay. So even with our dyno here, I always take the car off the dyno when I'm finished and just check to see that everything that we saw when we were on the dyno still stacks up under real world conditions, because of course we don't drive or race our cars on the dyno, so it's really important that everything is accurate under real world conditions. The other aspect as well is that when we are dyno tuning, particularly for a street car where we're focusing on drivability, getting into the light load areas of the fuel map can be quite problematic. And the reason for this is as we take our foot off the throttle to drop lower in the map zones in our fuel table, at some point what we end up with is a situation where the engine's no longer creating enough torque to keep the dyno moving. And when this happens, the RPM simply slows down. So we can't get into those very light load areas on the dyno, and we can actually get those on the road, particularly if we're going down a slight hill and we just back off the throttle. We can get lower in the load than we can on the dyno. So it's always a good idea just to check and confirm those. Now traditionally this can be quite difficult, particularly if you're using a helper, or alternatively if you're trying to watch your laptop screen while you're driving. Definitely not something I would strongly recommend. So logging really is your friend here, but then you're creating quite a large log file and you've got the problem of sifting through that log file to see what actually makes sense. So what I just demonstrated in our last worked example was how to use a logging package such as MegaLogViewer HD to help speed up this process. So we'll just jump across to my laptop screen. This is a log file that I took from the Ecumaster EMU Black, and actually we'll just start by jumping across to the EMU Black software. And this is the built-in logger. We've got it over here on the right hand side. Really powerful when we are on the dyno, because we can stop this logger, we can see exactly what was happening where, and that will also give us a little crosshairs over here on our VE map or our ignition map or whatever table we're on for that matter. And that's helpful, but again, when you've got a large log file, can be quite tricky scrolling through that. You do have the option here when you are live to actually save this log file. I've managed to highlight the open, but you get the idea. You can save this log file in a .csv format, which makes it really easy to then upload it into, or import it into MegaLogViewer HD. So we'll jump back across to MegaLogViewer HD. This is the log file that I took from a couple of laps driving around Highlands Motorsport Park. Now, focusing during this log file primarily on using the areas of the table, the areas of that VE table that we'd use under normal cruising conditions. So this normally encompasses perhaps somewhere in the region of maybe 1500 to 2000 RPM up to maybe 4,500 RPM, about 30 kPa, up to that transition onto boost, maybe 120 kPa. That's the area of the table we're going to be spending the majority of our time, and this is where getting our fueling dialed in accurately is key to getting really good drivability. So again, just looking at the data there's a lot to take in, and it's hard to be really specific. Just going over what is included here up the top. In red, we've got our RPM, and green, we've got our throttle position. So you can see there's nothing even comes close to wide open throttle in this. That's been done on purpose. We obviously still want to analyze our wide open throttle operation, but we do that in a separate way. Then we've got our manifold pressure in green in the next set of graphs, so we can see what's going on there. Then the information that's really interesting or useful to us is the two plots here. In green, we've got our measured lambda. This comes from a Haltech WB2 or canned wideband unit. And then in green, in yellow, we've got our target lambda. Our target lambda there really isn't moving around too much because predominantly we are targeting lambda 1.0, 14.7 to 1 on our pump fuel. So we can see that for the most part, we've got big chunks of it where the data is really, really close. We've got these little areas which aren't close at all because we're completely off the throttle and we're in overrun fuel cut. And these areas here, which also probably look like they do need a little bit of work. Now, again, analyzing that data on its own can be a little bit difficult. So what I did was went ahead and created a math channel, which I've called ECU MAFR, which is over here on the left-hand side. This is our white graph down the bottom. And this is essentially the error between our target and our measured air-fuel ratio. And if you've been through our EFI tuning fundamentals course, you'll know that we can use this to form a correction factor, which we can then apply directly into our VE table. What we do there is we take the measured air-fuel ratio, we divide that by our desired air-fuel ratio, and this gives us our correction factor. So again, just looking at that in itself is probably not that much use. So with MegaLogViewer HD, it gives us the ability to display all of this data in a histogram form, and this is incredibly powerful. So we'll come over here to our histogram tab, and what I've done here is I've generated a table that is essentially the same size and the same breakpoints as our VE table. You see we've got our RPM on the vertical axis here, we've got manifold pressure on the horizontal axis. We just drop across to MegaLogViewer, to Ecumaster software again, we can see that those breakpoints match what we've got here on the VE table. Important to make sure that the breakpoints and the zoning match, because this way we're getting data that we can apply to a specific zone inside of that table. Let's head back over to MegaLogViewer HD. So at the moment, this is demonstrating our measured air-fuel ratio. So we can see that most of the table's filled out pretty close to 14.7 to 1, which is again what we'd expect. We can also see, based on the color here, is essentially how many data points we've got. And when we're gathering data like this, we want a lot of data points, and this gives us good consistency. We can rely on the data. If we only get a bit of a flash in the pan, maybe one or two hits in a particular cell, which is what we've got with these white cells out here, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong, but I'd be a lot less likely to rely on this data. So the more hits we've got, the brighter green our zones go. So that gives us an indication visually of how good our data is. We can also see over here exactly how many data points we've got. In this case, what is it? Just about 17,000 data points. All right, so our AFR is helpful to a point, but this is our Z-axis here at the moment, AFR. What we'll do is we'll just change that across to that math channel that I created, which is our ECU master air-fuel ratio error. So straight away, now we've directly got some data that we can use to correct the air-fuel ratio or our VE table. Now, what we can see for the most part is we've got lots of numbers here that are sitting really close to 0, which is obviously ideal. 0 means we've got no error our measured air fuel ratio is right on our target. We're never going to get absolutely perfect results though, so we need to be a little bit practical. Generally, if I'm within about 1 or 2% of my target, I'm going to be pretty happy with that. However, straight away we can also see there are some seemingly problematic areas, particularly down at very light load here. We can see we've got numbers in the 58, 60, even 89% error. So at face value, that seems like we've got some big problems in our VE table. And it's really important when you're using a histogram like this to understand it's kind of a garbage in, garbage out kind of a deal. So we need to generate good quality data. Those particular errors there have been created during those areas where I was completely off the throttle. The ECU goes into overrun fuel cut and the measured air fuel ratio goes exceptionally lean. So what we want to do is eliminate that, and the MegaLogViewer HD also allows us to do that. Over here on the right hand side we've got a set of data filters. There are some predefined, we can make our own. In this case we've got one here which is for throttle closed. So if we click on that, what that's going to do is eliminate any samples that we had when the throttle was below, I think in this case I've set it up to be about 3% or something of that nature. So straight away we can see that we've got rid of all of that data down here, and now the data that we do have makes a lot more sense. Now another problem that we've got when we are creating a log file like this, it's important how we drive the car. We want the engine, for example, to be up to operating temperature. We don't want it to be suffering from heat soak, and we want to be quite gentle with our throttle inputs so that we aren't bringing in transient enrichments. We can actually see over here though, we do also have the ability to filter out transients, so we can filter out sharp changes in either RPM or throttle position so that we can clean up that data even more. Having said that, the data we've got now is looking pretty good, and we can see that straight away there are a few areas, particularly sort of higher RPM, light load, areas that we don't spend a lot of time on. We can see that extrapolating the numbers that we had in our table out into those areas might not have quite hit the mark. We've got errors of sort of 7 to 12% there. So this straight away allows us to zero in on those particular zones. In this case, for those cells there, we can see we're looking at 35 to 60 kPa, 5,000 RPM. So it allows us to really quickly go over, and I know everything is super small here, but we can find the exact same cells there in our VE table, and we can then apply the percentage change straight from our MegaLogViewer HD file. So a really powerful way of speeding up the process of tuning or dialing in your VE table. And the beauty of that software as well is that it does work with log files from just about any ECU, particularly if you can generate a .csv format log file, then super simple there. So it means that you don't have to try concentrating on your wideband air fuel ratio meter, or we're still trying to actually make changes on the laptop screen while you are driving. Obviously, when we are road tuning, one of the key things is we want to make sure that we are maintaining control of the car at all times. All right, next up, we've got an update on our FD3S RX7. That's actually going to come out in one of our next vlogs. So if you want a more detailed look at that, check out our vlog series. If you've got any questions in the vlogs as well, make sure you ask them. I'm being as active as I can getting in there and answering questions that have been asked. So I think we've got sound that'll come through my microphone. It's probably not going to be that great, but let's just watch this very short little startup video. So there we go, that is our FD3S RX7 starting up and running on the Adaptronic ECU for the first time. And for anyone who has been involved in a project car before, this really is one of the most satisfying parts of the build. Really sort of justifies all of the time, the blood, sweat and tears, as well as the significant outlay and cash you're usually pouring into these projects, getting it up and running for the first time. It wasn't without its share of issues. In particular, we found a dead map sensor on the the ECU initially, which was a little bit interesting. Not a big deal for us. We actually have an external map sensor that we are going to use, but at the time we had to change the plug over for that. One of the other issues we did have to go through was setting up the drive-by-wire throttle. And again, if you've been following our pre-shows for a while, I've talked fairly extensively about how we've gone about doing this. Brandon's done a great job using Fusion 360 in our 3D printer, designing up a bracket for the BMW S54 drive-by-wire motor, and then a new bell crank for both that drive-by-wire motor as well as the throttle body. What we actually found is through no fault of Brandon's, the throttles weren't actually opening the whole way. So what he did, again, if we just watch this little video here, it's pretty short, but using Fusion 360, you can actually model the movement of the bell crank coming out of the drive-by-wire motor as well as on the throttle bodies, making sure that the motion is matched. So it was a little bit of fiddling to get everything right there, but we've got that up and running. We had one of the tech support guys from Adaptronic help out with the initial setup as well. There's a few finishing touches that are going on at the moment, a few more systems checks that we need to go through, and with any luck we'll have that on the dyno by maybe the end of this week. We'll see, and hopefully from there it's going to be plain sailing, but as with most projects there's usually a few curveballs along the way, so we'll just see how that all works out. And again, that'll all be updated in our vlogs as time goes by. Now, last week I did mention that we have just released our corner weighting course through our sister company Racecraft, and I just wanted to sort of get a little bit more in detail as to what corner weighting exactly is. I explained last week, but essentially it's a process of balancing our car through jacking weight to individual corners of the car. It does require some specialist equipment, so we've actually got this Proform scale set here, which we will be doing as a giveaway. I think that's going to be starting probably next week. Now, traditionally, corner weight scales have been really expensive. They've come down over time, but they still are pretty costly. And we're actually pretty impressed with this Proform set because they've managed to get the price point under $1,000 US. I think this particular one you can purchase through Jegs for $970 US. The other aspect with them is due to the way they are constructed, they've basically got a lead-in at both ends, so you don't actually need a separate set of ramps to go along with these. These are also wireless, which is nice. Most of them are these days. A few years ago, most of the corner weight scales you purchased were a wired setup, which just adds one more complexity to the whole setup. So those communicate wirelessly to this little controller here. So the whole idea with corner weighting is we get our car onto the corner weight scales, and we can measure the weight being applied through the wheel and tire onto each corner of the car. Now, once we've done that, we know what our base starting point is for our corner weights, and there's a couple of important aspects that we can measure. One is the left weight percentage, which is where we are looking at the weight being applied to the left front and the left rear wheel as a percentage of the total weight. Now, in a perfect world for circuit racing or road racing where we want the car to turn equally in both left and right hand corners, what we're trying to do is get our left weight percentage to 50%. Unfortunately, with a modified production car, this is usually difficult, if not impossible, because we've got the mass of the driver, which is normally pretty significant, offset either to the left or the right hand side of the car. We can still go some ways to improving this though by actually moving ballast around the car. Now, usually you can move maybe your fire suppression system, maybe your battery, maybe even your fuel tank, fuel pump, surge tank, those sorts of things. And this gets more useful if you're actually starting from the ground up building a car, because if you build your car using corner weights, you can then make more sensible and educated decisions on where those heavier components are going to be located. But again, there's a limit to what you can do with a production car. The other aspect, which is arguably more critical though, which we look at, is the cross weight percentage. It sounds like a complex term, but it's really not. All we're looking at there is the right front weight and the left rear weight, so diagonally across the car, and that's represented again as a percentage of the total weight. And here again, what we're trying to do for a car where we're trying to get equal handling and balance in both left and right hand corners is target a 50% cross weight percentage. How do we do that though? The way we do this is by actually making small ride height adjustments at different corners of the car, by jacking different corners of the car up or down, and we only need to be talking a few millimeters change here. It doesn't have to be dramatic. We will either add weight to the corner we're lifting, alternatively we're also going to be removing weight from the other corners. Say for example, we increase the ride height at the front right corner of the car. What that's going to do is add weight to the front right as well as the left rear. And obviously the weight of the car hasn't changed. So of course, in turn, this means that we're going to be removing weight from the left front and the right rear. Alternatively, if we lower the car, everything basically works the opposite way. So that course has now been released. If we jump across to my laptop, this is the front page of our website. You can go to racecrafthq.com, and if we click on courses here, you will find our corner weighting fundamentals course, and that course there is $129 US. You can watch a little video that explains a little bit more about the course, and you can read all about it as well. As with all of our courses, this gives you the option to use our payment plan. You can split that up into as many as 8 individual weekly payments. And again, like all of our courses, it comes with a 60-day, no questions asked money back guarantee. So if for any reason you decide that the course just isn't quite what you're expecting or not a good fit for you personally, let us know and you'll get a full refund of your purchase price. Right, just head across to our Instagram as well, and this is an Instagram I put up last week. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of billet block construction, considering we're going to be talking about blueprinting today. Every time we post a photo of a billet block, we tend to get a little bit of backlash from people saying, well, that's not a RB or a 2JZ or a 4G63 or whatever it is. And yeah, that's not an argument I necessarily want to get into. Everyone's got their own opinions on that, but what we have seen, particularly at the pointy end of drag racing and even the pointy end of time attack racing these days, competitors are making so much power that the factory blocks really can't cope. Now, all things being equal, just swapping to a billet block is not necessarily going to guarantee you more power, and there's plenty of cast iron blocks that have been making similar power levels to billet. The problem is the reliability or life expectancy of the cast iron blocks often not quite so good. So most people can get their head around the fact that the billet block is going to improve engine reliability and engine strength. One of the areas though that's really often overlooked when it comes to billet blocks is the potential advantages in terms of the deck thickness. So we can see here, this is an RB block, RB30 block from Bullet Race Engineering over in Australia. This actually, interestingly enough, takes a crankshaft that's been modified to use Toyota 2JZ bearing journals, so it's kind of a hybrid between the 2JZ and the RB, arguably maybe the best of both worlds. But the block surface or deck surface here is really important to the reliability of a turbocharged engine, because as we increase the boost pressure, the cylinder pressure gets so high that it's physically trying to tear the cylinder head off the block. And what we'll find is that with a cast iron block with a relatively thin deck surface, that deck surface can actually flex, and it doesn't take very much flex before the head gasket no longer seals to the block and the head, combustion pressure escapes normally into the water jacket, and the rest is history. So with all of the billet blocks, a bit of a mouthful there, they use a 3/4 inch or 19mm thick deck surface, which is significantly thicker than pretty much any factory block I've ever seen, and this adds to that rigidity, that deck reliability, deck surface reliability, and of course the head gasket integrity. Pretty important, particularly you don't really want to lift the head and get water out onto the track and potentially under the tyres in a very high powered drag car. That normally doesn't end well, bit of a recipe for disaster. I also just wanted to check out here our latest video release. So this is one that we shot back at SEMA last year. We had to chase Carl Thompson all the way across the world, given that he is a Kiwi, to do a tech tour of his insane Nissan S15 drift car. Interestingly, for a New Zealand car, this has actually been set up left-hand drive because Carl, I think, has aspirations of making it over to the US and competing there. We've seen LS engines swapped into just about everything. They're a pretty well proven option. However, in Carl's experience, particularly with the power he was making, he actually found that the reliability of the stock alloy block wasn't actually up to it. He was having problems with bearing reliability, so he's actually opted to go to the LSX, the cast iron block here from GM Performance. So we talked to Carl about his motivations behind this. Also, long-time followers may recall Carl also had a quad rotor turbocharged Toyota Aristo drift car that we have done a Tector on many years ago back at World Time Attack. So we talk about his motivations going from quad rotor to the LS based build as well. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the LS build in this car and the build in general, it's exquisite. One of the highest quality drift car builds that we've seen. Check out that video. While you're on our YouTube channel, make sure you subscribe as well. Last for today, we are still running our Earnest giveaway, and this has got, I think, about 33 hours to run, so you're going to have to move quick, but there is still time to get your name into the draw. Don't actually have all of the gear to demo today, but you can win this Squire Workshop apron. You'll also get a pair of Tasker pants, which I'm wearing, which are a little bit hard to show you. You'll get a Smith's K Canvas jacket, you'll get the staple tee, you'll also get an HPA tee, and you'll also get a pair of hardened overalls, perfect for all those jobs out there in the workshop. On top of that, we're also chucking in an HPA VIP membership, which gives you access to every course we currently offer, as well as every course we'll be offering in the future. Lifetime gold membership as well, it will never expire. That also gives you access to our ETS Fab School and our Racecraft HQ sister companies as well. Awesome deal there. Value is over $2,500 US. So again, only about 30 odd hours left to go. So I'll get Scott to drop a link into the comments that you can follow to get your name into the draw. All right, thanks everyone for watching. Give us a few moments and we'll get started with our webinar.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.